This is my scrapbook video of Fylingdales. Being one of the many technicians who took early retirement in 1992, after spending the major part of my working life there, I think it is right that I try to record an image of our last days in the old place. So this is understandably going to be a trip down memory lane for those of us who spent so many years incarcerated in those windowless buildings. It was a love-hate relationship, really. We took pleasure and pride in keeping the system operational and hated turning out on a bitterly cold winter's night for graveyard shift, wondering if we would make it in or make it out across those snowbound moors. For the last 3 months, we skeleton crew kept the system ticking over on standby, whilst the younger staff in Serco operations brought the new phased array fully operational. The 3 radomes, the giant golf balls, each 160 feet high, mean Fylingdales to most people. Each dome houses a radar scanner, and each radar can see approximately 3,000 miles out into space. North Lock is the real entrance to the normally unseen centre of Fylingdales. It is a vast tunnel, but not a tunnel that is underground. This is above ground. 800 metres, almost half a mile long. Strict security checks are made before entering. No vehicle enters unless its electrics have been adapted to prevent interference to the radars. Orbiting the Earth are several thousand payloads and space debris, some friendly, others definitely hostile. Fylingdales has to know them all. The objects circling in space are catalogued, each one has an identifying code. The MU's primary mission is still to deter any potential enemy from launching a surprise attack by demonstrating that we are able to detect such an attack should it occur. Within seconds, the 100-ton scanners would see a missile launched, MIP would determine if it was ballistic, and its launch and impact coordinates would be transmitted to the US and UK command centres. This would be complemented by information provided by the early morning sites in Clear, Alaska and Thule in Greenland. So far, this deterrent has worked. The site motto Vigilamus, roughly translated "We watch," still applies. Here we have a cutaway Klystron power amplifier, a collector's piece indeed, 10 feet long, weighing 885 pounds, 400 kilograms, and needing 120,000 volts to excite it. I wonder if it has survived the side clearance. Try, Tony. Used as an amplifier in Bermudes was ideally suited for the long-range radar. Having high average power capability, the output is some 2,500 times larger than the RF input power. Back in the 1960s, the press declared the system would be able to detect a house door over Moscow, although no one said what it was doing there. Also, it gave a 4-minute warning to the UK. If 4 minutes seems a short time, it should be remembered that the warning was due to alert our retaliatory forces, not to give people time to dive for cover. During those early years, I remember reading of the predictions of likely environmental effects, including those by a scientist, which warned that the radars would create their own tropical climate. Also of radiation risks, the burnt vegetation and the hypnotized pigeons. When winter arrives on the moors, it seems to generate its own weather, and it's certainly not tropical. Many travellers are misled on a clear, cold winter's day after a light fall of snow into taking a drive out, only to find after a few miles onto the moors they're in Arctic-like conditions where blizzards pile up huge snowdrifts. Such drivers in the past have been forced to accept the hospitality of RAF Fylingdales, as in the winter of 1962-63, when 700 people were marooned for several days. Buses, cars, and tankers carrying much needed fuel for the generators disappeared under the snowdrifts. When the wind dropped, we succeeded in making a shift change by walking across the moors to Goathland to board a special train for Pickering. There were, however, still around 300 excess staff on site, and food and fuel supplies were causing some concern, and so whirlwind helicopters from Leconfield airlifted staff out and supplies in over the next 2 days. Although there have been delays in shift changeovers in recent years, the milder weather and the experience gained has helped to lessen the ordeal. The nerve center of the system, or so the technicians who maintain it would have you believe. It has been called many names. The more polite and relevant were the DTO area, the DS and DH, and lastly DSD. Within these green cabinets reside the computers, the electronics that ministered to the subsystems, namely the data takeoff, system checkout, control and switching, master synchronizer, central automatic monitoring and tactical displays. And each technician specializing in his own subsystems thought his was paramount and indispensable, and so it was. The data takeoff subsystem, consisting of VidRI and RADCON, filters and processes the radar returns and outputs in digital form to MIP and tactical displays. The velocity integrator and discriminator and range interpolator, more sensibly known as VidRI, receives the raw radar returns for each target, computes the range, velocity, that is Doppler, azimuth and elevation of the target, and outputs in digital form to the radar analog to digital converter, better known as RADCON, which performs association on a hit-for-hit basis of the same target and is transmitted as a scan report to the missile impact predictor, hereafter known as MIP. Having designed and constructed a system of considerable complexity, it is logical to question its ability to function as planned. Orbiting satellites will provide a partial test, but the shortage of real ballistic missiles, we hope, calls for a subsystem that will dynamically check out the system detection capabilities. And so, system checkout, SCO as it is known, is capable of injecting test targets at the front end of the radar receivers. Static targets and picket fence targets generated by the computer with varying space parameters can be set up at the computer control panel for calibration and troubleshooting. Right, you have it. This paper tape or mylar tape handler uses punched hole mylar tape. It is photoelectrically decoded and able to output at about 750 characters per second. Its ruggedness, reliability and permanence of the programmed tape was a definite advantage, with the engineering and operational program stored in mylar as well as magnetic tape. In practice, the system and operational staff are exercised by war games during each shift of the 24-hour period. And so with the operational program online, special magnetic RAID tapes containing missile, satellite and non-ballistic data are processed to exercise both men and equipment, and more importantly, it will add a measure of confidence in the system.
System report now, system report now. System report call. This is Fylingdales system report valid in a UK alarm and European alarm. Exercise, centres acknowledged by roll call.
System valid, MIP system is valid. No real threats to the system, no significance on our roll. Perth alarm levels 1.
Roger.
European TA 0074, UK 0117.
I have to thank a certain television company for the few excerpts I was unable to record, such as this operational exercise. You will also have to excuse the scarcity of technicians. Other than myself, most of my camera work was done on graveyard shift, and the skeleton crew, being rather thin on the ground, to pun a phrase, were not readily available at 2 in the morning. Although I had a permit for video recording, I still felt uneasy wandering around the buildings. With a lifetime in defense electronics, security was an inbuilt part of my job. These still shots, showing a few of us pretending to look industrious, were to record views of equipment we've fussed over for more years than we care to acknowledge. The primary purpose of the missile impact predictor is to determine the threat potential of target information. Back in the early 1960s, the MIP computers, the number crunching IBM 7090s with 32K memory, were the most powerful machines in operation. They were superseded in recent years by the Cyber 170 720s with a central storage memory of 196K RAM. In the Cyber's memory, an exact updated knowledge of everything orbiting in space. If a scanner sees something it does not recognize, MIP designates a radar to track it. A missile can be identified, its launch and impact coordinates calculated, the individual IR and ICBM threats, and total threat to each defended area will be transmitted to the command centers in the UK and US. The secondary purpose is to acquire high-quality satellite data, which is transmitted to the Space Surveillance Center deep in Cheyenne Mountain at Colorado Springs. In reality, the processing of both types of information has become very much intertwined. The Central System Monitoring Room, better known as a CSMR. Where reside the equipment controllers responsible for all the engineering activities, initiating system tests, coordinating troubleshooting around the system, and showing an impressive performance in completing the telegraph crossword in record time. The system checkout console, where selection of diagnostic tests and RAID tapes are made to provide results that are evaluated against known criteria. The equipment status panel, showing the serviceability of the radar chains, DTO, MIP, the TDP and master sync, and the CAMID console with status and online indications, and a punch card reader and printer which selects for monitoring and print out the actual value and upper and lower deterioration and failure limits of the numerous voltages and signals within the system. Why was it that the tick of this clock that controlled our working lives increased in volume in the early hours of the graveyard shift? The control and switching console for monitoring of radar sync and scan modes, and manual or automatic switching of the radar chains. Those early days doing installation were interesting times. So many contractors desperately trying to meet deadlines when they were not on strike. Huts, vehicles and mud everywhere. The site rapidly became a quagmire, and many puddles to trap the unwary, such as the infamous pond outside the canteen. It was entertaining when this pond was frozen over to watch the contractors exit after a heavy lunch. When we finally had floors to walk on, the janitors made desperate attempts to clean the mud off the near white floors, working through the night. RCA staff and a host of other contractors would tramp in at next day, covered in mud occasionally, marinated with slush. It almost sent some paranoid. Many of the cleaners came from local farming and fishing communities, and were not averse to setting up a stall for a quick sale of fish, flowers and vegetables, much to the amusement of the American RCA engineers, whose families soon made use of them. There was the tale of one tidy person who decided to paddle clean his wellies, but warned just in time that his footbath was 4 feet deep. Not so lucky the fireman, who stepped on a plank only to find it was floating and had an unscheduled dip. The Klondike atmosphere continued over that winter of 62-63, and as we installed and commissioned the equipment, we were often stranded on site due to the blizzards, and helicopters became public transport. And so at the end of June 1992, the system went on to standby, but kept in a state of readiness by a select band of fellows, chomping at the bit for that race to retirement.
Aligning all these small lenses in here. Oh, see, they'll get all the digits correct.
They're thinking of bringing the on site back.
Yes, we're just winding it up, ready.
There's apparently there's not much future in the new site, so jobs may, I don't want to start any rumours, but jobs may be secure.
I'll just say to Jas or Jerry really today, I'll say I'd love to be able to make a book of all these rumours in about that thick.
So don't quote me, but jobs may be secure.
Oh yeah. Yes. You offer posterity.
Official document for the RAF.
So we skeleton team were held back from retirement for 3 months to maintain the system, whilst the rest of the staff vanished to the pyramid to get hands-on experience in the run-up to full operation. It was a strange period, with minimum operational demands made upon us. The atmosphere became more relaxed, and ways to overcome the boredom had to be found. Crosswords and computer games became the obsession for some, and we were able to blow off steam with a competitive game of table tennis. As the weeks went by and the full realization came that the new system was going to make it, a sense of euphoria, elation, call it what you will, set in, but mixed with a feeling of sadness. It was the end of an era. Right then, gentlemen.
Here he is.
Oh, was that the right moment?
Just come right.
Just the right moment.
Throw the camera back to the Olympic standard now. Well, in actual fact. Oh, yes, the witches.
Oh, have you got the right HV
Oh,
on?
we weren't filming that.
Well, you can always edit the bad bits out.
I don't want any spins out.
Oh, George! Oh, make the table longer. Oh, you've got your running shoes on.
Oh, yes. So came the 29th of September, when my team, Team 2, had the pleasure of being on duty for the big switch off. It was also the day when my camera decided to play up. with the battery also giving false dates on display. And to start things off, the C sequencer on system checkout down sequence on its own, 20 minutes before 0. The feeling was mutual, we were impatient too.
When you were trying to install it, they went up instead of down.
Put your fingers in there, Colin, you'll be all right. Master secret off.
Tracker side down, there is no rest for the powerhouse. It is capable of supplying Whitby, but it will thunder on to keep feeding the site and the new radar for many years to come.
Well, this is the big switch-off day for Fylingdales. It's the 29th of September 1992, and for the first time for 30 years, all the equipment has been switched down. It's an eerie experience. We have all the cabinet doors open, and every piece of equipment is now cooling down. And by tomorrow morning, we'll be on our way, and that is the end of Fylingdales, as we know it. The tracker side, the old tracker side, will be completely shut down. One of the jobs left to do, we have all the RAID tapes and engineering and operational program tapes to check out, which can't be left. We have to degauss them or destroy all the data on the tapes. So that's my next job.
The TOR, the operations room that was the nerve centre of RAF Fylingdales. Here the operations crew ran their exercises to reassure the West that they were ever vigilant. They kept a tally of the satellites and debris orbiting in space, and with information gained from the interference analyzer console, took countermeasures by change of transmitter frequency and pulse mode. On the target tracking console, they deployed the 100-ton radars in their different scan modes by the press of a button and the twist of a joystick. The TMC, or DAC, or finally called the Situation Display Console, a terminal for computer traffic messages from MIP to display launch and impact points on the DVST, and DTO reports, Q points, and individual IC and IRBM threat reports on digital displays. It is now unmanned and silent. During the installation days, this room was the focus of RCA and RCA-GB staff, the hub from which rumours, anecdotes, solutions to the technical problems and company policy would emanate. Our American counterparts provided us with a jumbo-sized coffee machine which became the honeypot for the gathering. Over the cash drawer stood the sign, "In God we trust, all others paid cash." And every few months we and our American colleagues in tactical displays would dine out on the proceeds. When I walk into this room, I can't help feeling I should see the OS sitting at his desk ready to give me a tale of woe about the failure of some display, or relate a sequence of events that will send us off to study the system diagrams. Although our job is done, Fylingdales' task is not over. It is entering a new phase, with a much updated, more versatile system. 30 years have elapsed since the first bulldozer dug into the peat on Tom Cross rig, and RAF Fylingdales is now accepted as part of the scenery, although the radomes and tracker buildings are being demolished. Those of us who are moving on and looking forward to our leisure days will not miss those unsocial hours, but will look with a certain pride and satisfaction at the old place, and as we drive past, perhaps imagine we can still see those golf balls.